Hey folks, this is Kalani. The dev team just unveiled a roadmap for the rest of the Shadowlands testing phase, which gives us a better idea of what the game is going to look like come October 27th. We have news on how covenants are going to work, for real this time. There are huge changes to how alts are going to play in the new expansion, and we won't have to rely on RNG when it comes to sockets. So let's break it all down. Now before we get started today, I'm happy to announce that we have some beta keys to give away, and we're going to go do that on Twitter because it's so much easier when compared to trying to run something on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description and in the comment section below so you can hop on over to Twitter, check all of the entry requirements and get yourself lined up for a chance at a beta key. I'll also be giving a handful of beta keys away in my next few streams, so be sure to pop by twitch.tv/KalaniTV for another chance at beta. We go live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 12 PM PST, and we always love chatting with you wonderful folks, so I hope to see you soon. Let's start with the Covenant news, because I know a lot of players are interested and anxious to learn how this is shaping up. As of right now, there are no plans to #pull the Ripcord. If you're not too sure what that means, in one of his earlier interviews, Ian stated that they would go forward with covenants being restricted. That was the plan. You can only pick one at a time, join one at a time, you can only use one set of powers at a time. But they had a Ripcord, quote unquote, in place, and if they needed to pull that to enable free swapping of covenants or covenant powers and just open the entire system up, that's something they can do. With this statement, the dev team have locked in covenants as they are. When you hit max level, you get to pick one of the 4 covenants and progress their story, unlock their goodies, and you have access to their powers and their powers only. So no changes there, which I know a lot of high-end players aren't too happy about. Freely swapping covenants would ensure that there's essentially no wrong option, because you can swap back and forth as often as you want. A lot of players argue that that removes choice and you actually don't have a meaningful option there, but this discussion has gone back and forth multiple times at this point, and this is where we have ended up. So we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. If the vast majority of the player base really dislikes being locked into covenants so heavily, I imagine we will see changes somewhere down the line in patch 9.1 or 9.2. Hopefully this expansion doesn't turn into another case of too little too late, kind of like how the corruption system and corruption vendor ended up. Personally, I think the covenant system won't be the make or break for Shadowlands, and if you really want to swap your covenant because you made the wrong choice, swapping actually isn't too bad. You can pop back to Oribos, have a chat with a different covenant and swap right there and then. There's literally no barrier for entry when it comes to swapping covenants for the first time. There is a bit of a barrier for swapping back to a covenant you have previously left though. For example, if you start with Bastion and Kyrian and you think, nah, you know what, I want to hang out with the Necro Lords instead, they seem cool, so you hop on over to the Necro Lords. As easy as that. You might have a bit of catching up to do with Renown, but outside of that it's a painless transition. But after a week or so, you're really missing your Kyrian buddies. They were the ones who really jived with you, so you decide to swap back. Herein lies the problem. The wait, the restriction on covenant swapping. To go back to the Kyrians, you'll have to progress through a 2-week long quest. That's a 2-week time gate in that you have 2 quests and you only get 1 per week, not it's going to take 2 weeks of playtime to actually swap. In reality, the quests are very simple. You just need to do a few favors for your covenant, but it's very inclusive of what it counts. You can do dungeons, you can do world quests or bonus objectives. You have a progress bar that you have to fill, and a lot of different busy work will count towards completing it. From the big blue post we learn that these quests are not designed to be another grind. They're not supposed to take that long. They're more symbolic in forcing a 2-week waiting period, so you should be able to get them done without too much extra effort on your part, but you'll have to wait the 2 weeks to actually pick up both quests. 2 weeks might seem like a long time for some players who want to swap around willy-nilly, but they could have made this much worse or a lot more grindy. The good news is that you don't lose access to your current covenant while you're on these quests. So even if you're leaving the Necrolords for the Kyrian, until you finish the quest and join the Kyrian again properly, you're supposed to still have access to your Necrolord stuff. This is how the covenant system will work when the game goes live, unless someone manages to change the dev team's time in the next couple of weeks. Another very cool change coming with the launch of Shadowlands is the separation of pre-patch and launch day builds. Typically we get pretty much everything the game needs to go live with the pre-patch, and then the dev team just needs to flip a switch to let us start progressing through the new expansion. The main drawback for this approach was a shorter deadline. Essentially, the game had to be done and ready before the pre-patch date rather than before the launch date. So they're changing things up this time. Patch 9.0.1 will be our pre-patch with the Scourge Invasion, the Argent Crusade, the Return to Icecrown, the level squish, the leveling changes, item level changes, all the real big changes coming to the game. And then 9.0.2 will come afterwards with the Shadowlands content. This gives the dev team another 4 weeks to work on the game, basically, and to polish up as much as they possibly can. I think this is a really smart move, and probably something that should have been done much earlier, but I guess they really felt like they needed those extra 4 weeks for the Shadowlands expansion specifically. I know this one is going to be close. We all kind of knew Shadowlands was going to be close, but hopefully it's not too close and we actually do get a finished game ready to play on launch day. I know I've said that Shadowlands will be a completely different experience for alts and significantly better when compared to BFA, but the dev team just took this one step further. Previously in Shadowlands beta builds, when you arrived in Oribos on an alt after finishing everything on your main character, you could pick your covenant straight away and just pick which zones to do in whatever order you wanted. This had a few hiccups. The first was, quite simply, it felt weird to progress through the story of a covenant you had already joined. You've got all the goodies, you're an honorary member already, but you have to go through the same process and learn about them after joining them. It doesn't make too much sense. And then the other weird thing was doing the zones in any order didn't make too much sense either because of how the story is set up. So they changed it. And oh my gosh, alts will never be the same again. When you arrive in Oribos on an alt now, you can choose to continue your adventures as if you were there for the first time, working your way through each zone, playing with each covenant, testing out the covenant abilities, all that jazz, and just leveling up as normal. Or, and I hope you're sitting down because this might just blow you away, or you can skip the entire thing. You can choose to start your alt adventures as if you had completed the entire storyline of Shadowlands, and you can just go ahead and pick your covenant. You can literally play this like New Game Plus. Your alts are treated as alts, additional characters in the same story, rather than a new character all on its own. Of course, you can choose to go through the story again if that's what you want, but if you fancy just popping straight to endgame with this alt, you can do that as well. If you skip the storyline, you will still need to level up, but the dev team has said that they will implement bonus objectives where major quest lines used to be to help with that process. We have no idea if this will be significantly faster or not, but the real key here is that you can start progressing on endgame goals on your alts right from the start. You can pick a covenant, you can start working on farming anima, you can earn renown, unlock endgame content, even do world quests, all while you work on getting up to level 60. That is pretty bonkers in my opinion. So not only will Shadowlands be a fantastic expansion to play your alts because of no RNG and gear and no major endless grind to keep up with on every character, but you can get a huge head start on your alts progression right from the moment they arrive in Oribos, and if you want to, you can skip the storyline so you also don't have to take every single alt through each zone again and again and again. This is a massive change for alts, and it's going to make playing more alts much easier. Speaking of RNG in gear, the last big point I want to cover in this video is about sockets. With Warforging, Titan Forging and Corruption gone, the only random factor left on gear is sockets. This was still a minor annoyance because sockets are still incredibly powerful. You're going to want them. This is actually something I feel like patch 8.3 did right. You could buy sockets from Rathian and put them on any piece of gear that you wish. Well, that's actually been brought forward into Shadowlands. You'll once again be able to buy your sockets for your gear, so getting a socket randomly isn't this massive RNG power gain, it's actually more of a convenience, time-saving reward. You can get that socket eventually if you farm enough of the currency that we will need, but getting it randomly saves you a bit of time and effort. The end game goal for a best in slot list will be the same. Get all of your best in slot items with a socket included, but now you can work towards that yourself with a meaningful progression path. You don't have to grind out the dungeons time and time again. You don't don't have to hope for the luckiest of lucky drops from the raid. You can get the item in its baseline non-socketed form, then work on a socket and slap it on there. This is a huge addition to the already fantastic gearing changes in Shadowlands. Now we literally have zero reliance on RNG for our gear progression. Getting a socket randomly might help a bit, but it's not the only road we can travel. The vendor for sockets this time around is going to be Venari. If you're not too sure who this is, they are a broker in the Maw. They help us get into Torghast for the first time actually. Interesting little tidbit. And they sell a few items that might help us survive the horrors of the Maw zone a little bit longer. With the socket vendor being in the Maw, that might also give us more reason to actually spend time in the zone, farming the currency specific to the Maw, which previously we didn't have too much of a reason. So that's kind of cool too. If this is the case, the Maw is going to be one very busy place. Everyone's going to want their sockets. Alongside these changes, we'll also see some restrictions on which pieces of gear can actually have sockets, either randomly rolled when you get a piece of loot, or when you try to add a socket from the vendor. The current plan is to only have sockets available for helms, rings, necks, bracers, and belts. So 6 items total when you consider that we can wear 2 rings. That's not too many items when you think about it. The main reason for this is apparently to reduce the gap between a player with full sockets and a player with none. And I mean, it's certainly going to do that. It's 6 sockets down from what, 16? On one hand, you won't have to farm sockets to put on every single piece of gear, which is kind of nice, but on the other hand, you have access to less sockets. You're going to be less powerful at your absolute tippy top. But either way, I'm just really happy that we have another source of sockets that is not tied to RNG. And that's all of the news we have for right now. Some massive changes here for sure. Sockets will be something we can work towards again. Brilliant change there. And alts are being treated like alts instead of secondary mains. But what do you think from what you've seen so far? Do you like the option of skipping the story on characters after your first run through? And how do you feel about Covenants going live with a 2-week cooldown on rejoining one that you've left before? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. Now, if you want a chance at some of those beta keys, be sure to pop by our Twitter. You'll find a link in the comments and in the description straight to the giveaway. And if that's not enough for you, there's a few more up for grabs on the stream. If that's of interest, you can find us over at twitch.tv/KalaniTV. We stream every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 12 PM PST, and watching the stream and coming to say hi is one of the best ways you can support the channel right now. And if you ever wanted to be included in the long list of names at the end of every video, a subscription on Twitch is the easiest way to make that happen. You get a free sub to any Twitch channel if you have Amazon Prime too, so be sure to take advantage of that. A big thank you to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch already and to our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, well, now you know how. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.